My father-in-law was so convinced I cheated that he secretly stole my baby's DNA for a paternity test. When I found the results hidden in his house, my husband and I cut him off for good. So, my husband Jake and I have been together for about 6 years, and we've been hitched for 3 of those. His dad, Robert, has never really been my biggest fan. I think part of it is because I'm not the typical girl he imagined for his son. Jake's family is super traditional. The women are all about being quiet and going along with what the men say. His mom just nods along to whatever Robert decides, and his sister does the same with her husband. Then there's me. I have a career, I'm outgoing, and I speak my mind. I don't just smile and nod when I disagree. Over the years, Robert's slipped in some sly comments about how I'm too independent or care too much about my career. Like when Jake and I got engaged, Robert actually pulled Jake aside to ask if he was sure about marrying someone who might not be a proper wife and mom. Jake and I laughed it off back then, but looking back, maybe it should have been a bigger warning sign. Robert's not openly nasty. It's more this passive-aggressive vibe. He'll say stuff that seems nice on the surface, but has a little sting to it. Like when I got promoted at work last year, he said it was nice that some women could have it all these days, but he hoped I wouldn't forget what really mattered, like family. At family dinners, he'd always find something to nitpick. Too little seasoning, not enough sides, or why didn't I make his favorite dish? Jake always had my back, but he also tried to smooth things over instead of confronting Robert head-on, saying stuff like his dad was just old-fashioned, or didn't mean it in a bad way. I get wanting to keep the peace, but sometimes it felt like Jake was more focused on avoiding conflict than fully supporting me. Things got more complicated when we started trying for kids. After a year and a half, I finally got pregnant with our daughter, Emma. Before that, Robert would make comments about how maybe if I wasn't so stressed about work, we'd have an easier time getting pregnant. He even suggested I quit my job to focus on being a proper wife. I mostly just shrugged off his comments, but they were frustrating. When I finally got pregnant, Robert's attitude got kind of weird. He became super interested in my pregnancy, asking all sorts of personal questions about doctor visits, conception details, and whether I was taking good care of myself. At first, I thought maybe he was just excited to be a grandpa, but it felt a bit off. He'd make strange comments about how the baby better look like Jake, or how genetics were a funny thing. As my pregnancy progressed, he'd say stuff like, "Genetics don't lie," and he seemed to be looking for something in Emma's features even before she was born. When Emma was born 8 months ago, she was perfect. She has Jake's dark hair and nose, but my lighter eye color and maybe my face shape. To me, she looks like a perfect mix of both of us. But from the get-go, Robert was odd about her appearance, always making remarks about how babies change a lot in their first year, or how you can't really tell who they look like when they're so young. Those first few months with Emma were crazy, but we didn't think too much about Robert's behavior. We'd notice he'd study her face intensely, like he was searching for something. His comments about her eyes or features seemed pointed, but we were just exhausted new parents trying to survive. About 4 months ago, Robert started offering to babysit Emma more often. We were grateful because we were so tired and appreciated the help. He seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with her, and she was happy with him, so we let him help out. But then, I started noticing strange things. Emma would have different clothes on sometimes when we got back, with Robert claiming they'd had a diaper disaster or spit-up incident. It happened a lot, more than when she was with us. One time, I came home early from getting groceries and caught Robert looking startled. He was in the kitchen with Emma and looked guilty about something. When I asked if everything was okay, he said Emma was just being fussy with her bottle. Little things would be out of place after he babysat, like her hairbrush in the wrong room, or her blanket folded differently. Jake thought I was overreacting when I brought it up, saying his dad probably just tidied up or forgot where things went. Then came the questions. Robert started asking specific things about Emma's health and development. Not your typical grandparent stuff. He wanted to know about her medical records and if she'd had any blood tests. When I asked why, he'd say he was just curious or wanted to make sure she was healthy. He even joked about Emma's paternity in a way that wasn't really funny, saying things like, "She's definitely a mystery baby," or, "I wonder who she really takes after." Once he even made a comment about how modern technology can answer so many questions about babies these days, and when Jake asked what he meant, Robert just laughed it off. I tried talking to Jake about how uncomfortable his dad's behavior was making me, but Jake kept defending him, saying Robert was just adjusting to being a grandpa and Maybol. He didn't know how to express his excitement properly. Jake also pointed out that Robert hadn't been around babies much since Jake and his sister were grown when their friends started having grandkids. Looking back, I should have trusted my instincts more, but as a new mom, I was tired and wondered if I was just being oversensitive because of my history with Robert. I didn't want to rock the boat in Jake's family over what might just be misunderstandings. The incident that made me finally speak up happened 2 weeks ago. So not too long ago, Jake was away on a work trip, and I was holding down the fort at home with Emma. I was pretty wiped out and feeling super overwhelmed. So when Robert offered to take Emma for the afternoon so I could catch a break, I was like, "Yes, please." My plan was to sneak in a nap and maybe tidy up a bit while she was with him. Robert showed up around noon, and I handed Emma over to him. She was all smiles since she had just finished lunch. I told him I'd likely just be napping upstairs and to holler if he needed me. He assured me they'd be fine and encouraged me to get some rest. I ended up crashing hard and had one of those deep sleeps that you only get when you're really exhausted. When I finally woke up, it was nearly 5:00 p.m., meaning I had passed out for about 4 hours. I felt a bit guilty for dozing off for so long, but I was also feeling seriously refreshed. I headed downstairs, expecting to see Robert and Emma chilling in the living room, but the place was eerily quiet. I called out for Robert and heard him reply from the kitchen. I found him sitting at the table with Emma on his lap, and she was unusually fussy, reaching for me and making these upset little noises. Normally, she's totally chill with Robert, but something was off. Robert seemed really jittery when I walked in. He started rambling about how Emma had been awesome all afternoon, but got a bit cranky because she probably needed her mom. He quickly handed her over and began gathering his things like he had someplace to be. That's when I noticed something weird. Emma's hair looked different. It was styled in a way I never do because she's a baby, and I usually just let her hair be. I brought it up with Robert, and he said he was just playing with her hair while she was on his lap. But things got stranger. Emma was wearing a different outfit than what I had dressed her in that morning. I'd put her in this cute little yellow dress my mom got her, which I loved. Now she was in a plain white onesie I'd never seen. When I asked Robert about the outfit change, he got all defensive and said she had spit up on her dress. He told me he found the onesie in her dresser. Emma almost never spits up anymore, and even if she did, it's rarely enough for a full outfit change. Plus, I know every piece of clothing she owns, and I didn't recognize that onesie. I asked Robert where the yellow dress was so I could wash it, and he claimed he already tossed it in the laundry upstairs. But when I checked later, it was nowhere to be found. It was like the dress just vanished. The whole interaction left me with a weird feeling. Robert took off pretty quickly, which was odd since he usually sticks around to chat after watching Emma. And Emma was extra clingy the rest of the day, like something had upset her. I tried telling myself I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange had happened while I was asleep. That night, when Jake called from his trip, I told him about the weird vibes from the afternoon. I tried to explain why I felt uneasy, but Jake thought I was just stressed and reading too much into it. He suggested maybe his dad was just trying to help by cleaning Emma up. Still, I couldn't shake it. I started paying attention to Robert's behavior more closely, and soon I noticed a pattern. All those times Emma's clothes got changed while Robert was babysitting, his questions about her medical stuff, and his odd comments about her appearance, it all started adding up. I wondered if Robert was suspicious about Emma's paternity and was trying to confirm something. The idea made me sick. I couldn't believe my father-in-law might suspect I'd cheated. But the more I thought about his behavior, the more it seemed to fit. His pointed comments about genetics, the way he studied Emma's face, and the questions about my travel during pregnancy, it all made sense if he thought I'd had an affair. I felt like I had to find out what was really going on. I knew that Robert and Jake's mom were going away for the weekend, so their house would be empty. I've been there tons of times and knew where they kept important documents. If Robert did get a paternity test, chances are he'd have the results in his office. I know it sounds crazy, and I'm not proud of it, but I was desperate. I got Jake's mom's spare key from its hiding spot and went to their house while they were gone. I felt terrible sneaking in, but I needed answers. I headed straight to Robert's office, where he keeps all his important papers. I started rummaging through his desk and filing cabinets, not sure what I was looking for, but hoping it would be obvious if I found it. And then I did. In the bottom drawer, beneath some old tax docs, was a manila envelope with Emma's name on it, in Robert's handwriting. Inside was a paternity test report from a lab I didn't recognize. The report was dated about 6 weeks ago, around the time Robert had been watching Emma more. It showed a 99.97% probability that Jake was indeed Emma's dad. I just sat there, stunned, staring at the report for what felt like forever. Robert had actually taken samples from my baby girl and Jake to secretly test if Emma was really his granddaughter. He was so convinced I'd been unfaithful that he paid for a paternity test without telling anyone. The results, though, proved him wrong. Jake was Emma's dad, no doubt about it. But Robert never mentioned it and just kept treating me and the situation with suspicion. I took photos of the report with my phone, put everything back, and left their house feeling numb. I couldn't believe this was happening. My father-in-law secretly tested my daughter's DNA because he was so sure I cheated. When Jake got back from his trip, I showed him the pictures of the test. At first, he couldn't believe it was real. He kept saying there must be some mistake, that his dad wouldn't do something like that. But the proof was right there. Jake was silent for a long time, trying to come to grips with how his dad could do something so invasive and hurtful without telling anyone. Finally, he decided he had to confront Robert and get some answers. So yesterday, Jake went to his parents' house to talk to his dad directly. So, here's the deal with the whole paternity test drama. Apparently, Jake's dad, Robert, initially tried to brush it off. But when Jake confronted him with the actual report, Robert had no choice but to fess up. Robert's reasoning was that he was worried about Jake getting hurt. He mentioned he'd seen some red flags in my behavior when I was pregnant, which made him suspicious. The guy claimed he wanted to save his son from possibly raising another guy's kid. He insisted he was going to come clean to Jake about the test results, but was still figuring out the best way to break it to him. When Jake pressed his dad for details on what exactly made him suspicious, Robert pointed fingers at my work trips during pregnancy, saying they seemed kinda secretive. Plus, he thought Emma didn't look like Jake when she was born, which added to his doubts. Jake pointed out that the paternity test results debunked Robert's suspicions, but Robert just said he was relieved Emma turned out to be Jake's daughter. Still, he didn't apologize or acknowledge how out of line his actions were. Jake came home totally upset, saying he'd never seen his dad act so paranoid and invasive. He felt betrayed that his dad suspected me of cheating without ever hitting him up for a chat about it. We spent hours hashing out what to do next. Jake was torn between being mad at his dad and wanting to smooth things over with the family, whereas I was just livid. The idea that Robert had been sneaking around, taking samples from Emma without a word to us, made me feel sick. What if he'd accidentally hurt her or scared her while swiping whatever he needed for the test? And even after he found out I hadn't cheated, Robert kept treating me like I was shady. Like, come on. So after talking it out, Jake and I decided to cut off contact with Robert, at least for now. What he did was a massive breach of privacy and trust, and there's no just sweeping it under the rug. He went behind our backs to sneak a test on Emma, and that's crossing a line. Jake gave his dad the lowdown, saying we won't be bringing Emma around anymore and need some space. Robert got all defensive, claiming he was just looking out for his family, and that any good dad would do the same. Jake told him that his actions were wrong, no matter the intentions, and that we just can't trust him with Emma anymore. Robert got angry, saying we were blowing things out of proportion now that the test confirmed Emma was Jake's daughter. Robert's reaction just made it clear we were making the right call. He still doesn't get why what he did was such a problem, thinking the ends justify the means. Jake's mom later called, trying to get us to reconsider. She admitted Robert messed up, but said he loves Emma and wanted to be sure she was really part of the family. She urged us to think about Emma missing out on having a relationship with her grandpa. Then came another twist. Jake's sister Lisa called, all curious about what was happening since their parents were super upset. When Jake filled her in, her reaction surprised us. Lisa admitted she wasn't shocked about the paternity test because she'd also had her doubts about Emma's paternity. She even mentioned noticing the same behavior during my pregnancy that Robert did. I was floored and totally blindsided, feeling like Jake's whole family was secretly judging me. Lisa said she was glad the test confirmed Emma was Jake's daughter and hoped we could all move on, but thought we were being too harsh on Robert for just trying to protect Jake. This got Jake thinking maybe we were overreacting, given multiple family members' concerns. He started to suggest Robert might have just mishandled his worries, but had good intentions. This frustrated me big time because, no matter the intentions, what Robert did was a huge violation. We ended up having a pretty big argument. Jake accused me of holding grudges, while I felt he was more concerned with his family's feelings than about safeguarding our daughter. Jake's mom later called me directly, trying to mend things, saying Robert was sorry and suggested family counseling or mediation. She said Robert never meant to cause harm and was crushed by us keeping Emma away. I told her I appreciated the gesture, but needed time to process everything. The conversation with Jake's mom made me second-guess myself, wondering if I was being selfish or overreacting. Maybe, for Emma's sake, I needed to try to get past this for family harmony. Now I'm just all kinds of confused. Jake's leaning more toward patching things up with his dad, especially after Lisa's reaction, suggesting Robert's suspicions weren't totally out of left field. Am I blowing this out of proportion? So here's the deal. I was really torn up over this whole situation with Jake's dad, Robert, and wasn't sure if I should go for counseling or something like Jake's mom suggested. I didn't want to ruin Jake's family, but I was struggling with what Robert did. People were telling me I was overreacting, and I started to wonder if they were onto something. Jake was getting more and more annoyed with me for avoiding his dad, and I felt like maybe I was being too harsh. I decided to dig deeper into what exactly Robert did, thinking that if I understood it better, I might be able to move on. Jake was on board to ask his dad the details about how he conducted the paternity test. I think Jake hoped that knowing more would make it all seem less creepy. So Jake went to his parents' house and got Robert to spill the beans. Turns out, Robert had been planning this for ages. He dug into all sorts of paternity testing companies and found one that would take hair samples instead of cheek swabs, thinking it'd be sneakier. Over several babysitting gigs, he yanked hair from Emma's head while she was passed out or distracted. And here's the kicker. Robert admitted to giving Emma some Benadryl to make her sleepy so she wouldn't fuss when he snagged those hair samples. Yep, he drugged my baby without us knowing. The thought of him secretly dosing up Emma made me sick to my stomach. What if she'd had a bad reaction? Thank goodness nothing happened, but I freaked out when Jake broke the news to me. We called Emma's doctor, who was appalled. She said that giving Benadryl to a baby without medical advice and our consent was extremely risky and possibly illegal. The dosing for babies is super specific, and Robert had no clue about that. She said it might even be worth reporting to the police. This made me realize just how dangerous the whole situation was. It wasn't just about privacy anymore, it was about Emma's safety. So I called the cops to see what our options were. They said that giving meds to a kid without the parents knowing could be child endangerment or even assault. We could file a report if we wanted to take it further legally. Jake was really torn about getting the law involved. He understood why I was upset but didn't want